Hello and welcome back to the training vlog. It's been like, I guess, 2 weeks now, so this title's a lie. But I, you know, had some time off, so after comp to, decompress and allow myself to return to training in a way that would make me happy. Not to say that I wouldn't have been happy if I just went back, but I've never taken a voluntary break from weightlifting, and I thought that it might be a good time to just realign myself mentally and physically. And this last week was really good. So, safe to say I accomplished that. If you notice jump in quality, it's because I got a new phone. So that's it. I got the 15 Pro because that's the new bad boy. I used to have an 11, and I've noticed like a huge technical upgrade. So if you're in the same boat, I mean, I recommend it. It's like the same Apple stuff, but if you use your phone a lot, which most of us do at this point, it's kind of worth it. But in terms of training, leaving the Valhalla Open, we had some very apparent areas of improvement, at least from my perspective, that we need to work on. That being in the snatch, and it usually ends up being the snatch. But yeah, that's just part of the learning process. So the plan now is to attack those areas aggressively and with great intention. If you hear a lot of background noise, I'm still figuring out the mic situation. Actually, recording in the car just because I don't know, it's convenient. But yeah, the idea is that I start building capacity at different catch positions because generally speaking, I have very little awareness of where I'm actually catching the bar. I mean, in terms of my hips and legs generally, from the upper body, I need to do a better job of securing my catch, and you'll notice now that I am trying to experiment with where I'm actually catching the bar overhead, relative to like my head. So really getting that, like the what's the word? The tightness of my scaps, so that I can secure the bar sort of like definitively over my traps. With that, I need to be able to sort of catch with my head a bit angled downward, just to create like a more just to create more of a platform sort of above my shoulders and have it be less dominated by my shoulders in the catch. I hope that makes sense. That's at least what I'm trying to do physically. And Josh and I are on board with it. We're kind of implementing some of that stuff in my prep work. So stay tuned for that next week. But yeah, as we enter like a rebuilding period, I am very impressed with my output over the last week. Mostly because during this phase of training, I usually completely forget how to weightlift. So safe to say there is some improvement happening. Which, you put enough time into the sport, you kind of hope that there's improvement happening. But I think that leads into like what I have been ruminating a lot on this last week, which is intent in training. Mostly because I've seen a lot of people discuss this kind of broadly, with how, what do you count as a make in training? How do you sort of not guarantee, but as close as you can, guarantee some progress in the gym? And yeah, that kind of swirls around intent. And for me, I tried for a very long time, like being very meticulous with like tracking specific data around my training. And that was effective to a certain degree. I think depending on like your level of experience in the sport, it is more or less relevant. At the time, it was too early for me, mostly because there's a lot more thinking and less doing on my part. And when you're not trained in weightlifting, you can't really get around those aches and pains. You'll have a lot more bad days than good. or at least like if you are someone who hyper analyzes things, you know, like there's always going to be a lot more things wrong with your training from your perspective. But with a little bit more experience, I think navigating those expectations is a lot easier. But being mindful with what I want to accomplish is something that I think, for me at least, is very time and outcome dependent. What that means is, you know, when we're in competition prep, it's a lot easier to motivate yourself to push a little harder. And this specific rebuilding period, I am happy with my level of effort. Um, that being said, the way you come about that, one, is to set yourself some like very achievable um goals per session, not in like not that are weight oriented, but more like process oriented, I think. So just thinking about like intent in the lift, maybe like creating the right mental space around lifting itself, which sounds really vague and um ethereal, but it's a if you're someone who competes in weightlifting, you know what it's like to walk up to the bar on the platform and then have to do it in a way that's not the most comfortable to you. And in those circumstances, you know what it means to like find yourself in the bar, find yourself on the platform. And I think that you can simulate that with your intent in training, not by like, you know, having a lot of people watch you or something, or like facing different directions, because that's just distractions. I think it's more like having like a systems check, or a way to like guarantee as much focus in training as possible. So like removing distractions, or holding yourself accountable, or rest periods. Basically, there's an element of like uh, taking an attempt at having a good pace in training that will enable you to reduce that overthinking. Or at least for me, that's what's helping. Um, but you know, it's also important because, you know, this piece of advice, I think a lot of coaches will talk about, a lot of athletes will talk about, but something that I think is very absent from weightlifting content is, uh, you know, what does it actually mean to have fun when you train? How do you capture that? And how do you make your goals work with enjoyment? Because, you know, I think when you go about training really seriously, it's really hard, or it's really easy to forget that it's something fun that you're able to do. It's not the hardest part of your day. And then in the first 2 years of me training, I really struggled to make it fun for myself sometimes. And I think that part of that is not being too hard on yourself. You know, when you're taking lifts, you don't want to, you know, everyone wants a lift to be perfect, and you're going to try and make it perfect regardless of what I say here or what anyone tells you, because you want it to be perfect, right? So if you're going into training and you beat yourself up because your PR was a press out, or you had some like instability, and it's the first time you tried that weight, then, you know, you're not letting yourself be rewarded for that, and thus you suffer in some way, shape, or form. And I think that might be a controversial statement to some people, because they really want to be like, oh, when I get into training, like, practice how you play, you know, everything has to be a perfect lift. And it's just not realistic to expect that all the time, in my opinion, because you're going to have bad days, and what? You're going to just not train when it's bad. That is at least my general feeling about, you know, that attitude now. And it's not realistic to expect, especially for people who are within like their first 5 years of training. Like, you're gonna have bad days, um, and you're gonna have good days, but, you know, regardless of which one of those you have, when it's competition, you have to go either way. And I feel like we as weightlifters tend to glorify a lot of that self-imposed pain and suffering. And I think there's a lot to learn in that, because of how, you know, weightlifting mirrors life. And a lot of people, find themselves in the gym and have an opportunity to process like their feelings through weightlifting. And that's all fine and dandy, like keep doing that if that's what, you get from being in the sport, because, Lord knows I do that too. But you also have full opportunity to decide what success means to you. And, that reward factor has to come either way, regardless of, how you perform. Taking myself back to that example of like PRing for the first time and then being upset with like soft elbows or whatever. If you're working with a weight that you do all the time, you probably should be a bit more thoughtful when it comes to how you finish your lifts, so that you don't have like a press out problem, because that's also important, because that's not allowed in competition. But if you're beating yourself up because because you are unable to have that stability, that might make it so that you hesitate with certain reps, or you hit really hard plateaus, or you just don't want to train anymore because that level of anxiety is too high. Either way, it's gonna be difficult for people to maintain that level of rigor all the time. So in my opinion, try and have fun with it. Whatever keeps you in the gym. That's like my biggest mantra right now over this last year is, you'll learn with the reps. So go get them. Anyways, that's it. See you next week. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.